Thank you, Callie. And again, we want this session, and as you'll see once we get started, it will be very conversational. So we invite questions throughout. Sometimes folks wait till the end, but we definitely want it to be informal and conversational. If you're sitting way in the back, I'm not going to make you move, Vicki Carlson, but feel free to come on down to the front so we can have a conversation. We were together at the NACM annual conference in Pittsburgh 2 years ago, telling folks about a brand new initiative called the Reimagining Dependency Courts effort. It's funded with support of Casey Family Programs out of Seattle. The idea was to allow the National Center for State Courts to select 4 states to work closely with the judicial branch to improve permanency outcomes for kids and families through better court policy and practice. So we selected 4 states, Alabama, if you haven't figured that out yet, Florida, Illinois, and Oregon. So we've been working there over the past couple years. So we wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to come back and see all you fine folks and give you an update and really highlight one of the strategies. Just a little bit about the initiative and why this work is important. We'll talk about the opioid epidemic in just a moment. But first, we've made a lot of improvement over the years in the dependency court area, improving outcomes for kids and families. But they're very complex legal processes. As you know, there's tons of players, tons of stakeholders, and there's still a lot of work to be done. Outcomes for kids and families aren't necessarily where we want them to be or they should be. Secondly, because of, in part, the opioid epidemic, we're seeing a pretty scary trend nationally with the numbers of kids in care, coming in to care and leaving care or not leaving care. So what you see on this slide, if you're sitting in the back, you probably can't see it, Vicki, but so we have, every state has to report twice a year to the federal government statistics related to all the kids in their state in out-of-home care. So this is data from the year 2000 to 2016. It's just a snapshot in time, so it's on September 30th of that year nationally, and this is the total number of kids in out-of-home care, which for most of the kids we're talking about foster care. So we peaked back here in 2000 with over 550,000 kids in care. And we did a lot of work, I say we, states, agencies, courts. There was a lot of effort to really, in part, kind of close the front door. But we made, as you can see, lots of good progress. We got down to a low in 2011 of just under 400,000 kids in care. Everyone was patting each other on the back, but then we can see this line climb. The 2017 numbers have, I think, informally been released, but it's continuing to climb. We know in large part, I think it's fair to say, this is a result of the opioid epidemic. These are kids, mostly the highest, largest age group are the babies, actually, the kids a year or younger. But so that's another reason why we felt this work was really important. And then third, because the outcomes for these kids can be so dismal. If you look at the studies that follow kids who age out of foster care, the statistics are, horrible in terms of, 1 in 4 kids will experience homelessness. Less than 3% will earn a college degree. One of the more startling statistics that I've come across recently is 1 in 4 kids who age out of foster care will experience PTSD, which is twice the rate of war veterans. So let that sink in a little bit. So it's important work. So with that, we wanted to come back again and highlight the work in one of our states, Alabama. So this work began in 2016 in each of the 4 states. We went in with a team. We did an assessment process, essentially. We did focus groups, interviews. We looked at data, really trying to diagnose in those states and in the local jurisdictions we were focusing on what were the barriers to permanency for kids and families, and particularly what were the court barriers, what things were courts doing or not doing well or not doing good enough that were impacting how long kids stayed in care. We really were trying to focus in large part on, we call them usually long stayers, but those kids who were really languishing in foster care. We were defining it, and nationally it's kind of defined as the kids who stay in foster care for 24 months or longer, so 2+ years. So that was our focus. So I'm gonna pause there and turn it over to Carrie McMillan. She's going to talk a little bit about, in each state we kind of were flexible. The process was flexible. We allowed the state to kind of guide the process if they wanted to select just a couple of jurisdictions to focus or pilot things, or if they really wanted to focus on a statewide policy level. It varied. But I'll let Carrie talk about in Alabama at the decision at the state level where and why to focus its work.
Thank you. Because it's a conversation, I'm going to stay seated. But we looked at statistics for the entire state, and really Casey Family Programs did a great job of coming up with those statistics, and we specifically looked at long stayers, children in care over 24 months. So in looking at that, we looked at the highest numbers, and no surprise, it came from our largest counties. So our largest counties were Jefferson County, which is the Birmingham area, and Mobile County, which is Mobile. So those are the two counties that we went into. The counties, in starting off with this process, we looked specifically at those counties' needs. The counties looked very different. Their needs were very different. So our approaches were very different. So in Mobile, it was really the judicial leadership that we needed more case management and more dockets because we needed to speed up the process. The process was just lagging. And of course, y'all know if you don't have court, then obviously those cases are not being heard and they're not moving toward permanency. So that's what we did there. Then in Jefferson County, we went in and we looked at theirs, and the majority of their goals were reunification, but they had stagnated. So we did, in both sites, we pulled like 10 to 15 cases and did studies of those cases and said, why did they stagnate? What happened? This child is now 15 and he came into care at 10. What would you have done different at the age of 10 that's not an option now at 15? So we not only looked at the children that were in care now, but how do we want to resolve this for the future? So that's where that started.
So I'll ask the judge to talk for a few minutes about kind of how the initiative that you'll hear more about in a minute, the Family Reunification Program, kind of got started. And part of it was through the judge's experience with his family drug court and some of the lessons and learnings that came through that process and the positive outcomes that they were experiencing. People started to recognize at least some of the factors that were contributing to those. So I'll let him talk.
Okay. Can you hear me through this? Okay. I've been out at family court in Jefferson County for about 26 years now. I was a bailiff for one of our judges 26 years ago for 3 years. She kind of taught me my love for the family court, and then I was a private attorney for 10 years. And I think I may have written my bio wrong because Kelly said I've been on the bench since 2006. I've actually been on the bench for 12 years. So I'm going into my third term there in Jefferson County. The most unbelievable thing that I can tell you about those 12 years, and really 26 years altogether, is that I'm seeing the third generation of the same family that I saw 26 years ago. It's the most unbelievable thing I'd ever seen. So my approach was, we keep doing the same thing, but we keep expecting different results. Something's got to be different. So in 2010, back when Kelly was still with us, that is correct, isn't it? Okay. And under the leadership of Justice Sue Bell Cobb, she gave us a grant, our very first grant, to get some program off the ground, and she was pushing the drug courts. And you'll hear me say that, drug courts, and you'll hear me say wellness court. It's all the same thing. We changed the name about 3 years ago because I thought the stigma of saying, boss, I've got to go to drug court might be a little easier than to say I got to go to wellness court. So we changed the name, but unfortunately I keep saying those interchangeably, but they are the same thing. So we kicked it off in 2010, not knowing what in the world we were doing. Surrounded myself with some great people, and I think that's one word that you're going to hear throughout this talk is collaboration. We brought members for the University of Alabama, but that's in Tuscaloosa, but there's also a partnership in the University of Alabama in Birmingham. So we've surrounded ourselves with those, also with our child welfare system, which is Jefferson County DHR. And we came together and came up with this wellness court. And just in short, it's an 18-month process that focuses not just on treatment, but it focuses on basically rewiring or trying to change a person from beginning to end. It's an 18-month process. There's 4 phases. There's nothing in writing as far as how long you stay in a phase. It's just as a staff, we staff these cases very regularly, every other week. And we make a decision as far as a team, what phase you're in. But those are anywhere from like 4 to 6 months. The first phase is mostly sitting on nothing but treatment. That's what we focus on mostly, and then we start applying the parenting techniques, getting jobs. One thing that I have discovered, and I don't know that I can scientifically prove it, we do have a very, very bad drug problem, but I think even worse, we have a worse mental health problem that has gone untreated. Most of my population in my wellness court is a female population with several kids. But I've come to know these people. We meet once a week. It's non-adversarial, so I have no attorneys in there. It's just a one-on-one team, which they love. They don't like the middleman telling them not to say something, not to say that, or say this. They love the ability to come in there and tell their story. Now, it takes a lot. I think part of the success is, number one, that one-on-one, that builds a trust and a relationship with the folks. The other thing, too, and a big burly guy from what I call the rural area of Jefferson County, it's always hard for me to say, I love you, and I mean that genuinely. I don't mean that relationship-wise, but I tell these folks regularly, I love them. So it builds this trust, and I don't know that really anybody in their family has, especially with the reaction I get from them. The first time it's almost like a gasp, but then they know what I mean. It's just a genuine thing. And out of that, I think in the end comes a lot of hope, because they can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Now I could go on all day long talking about wellness court / drug court, but I did want to tell you about that, and that's one way that we're conquering this. We also tried to figure out, if I've got 2,000 new cases every year, why in the world do I only have 60 people in my drug court at one time? Now granted, a lot of those people have 2 or 3 children on average, so that represents a pretty good number of that, but it still doesn't get anywhere, not even 30% of the number of cases that I have. So one thing that we tried to do as well is we thought, well, possibly there's people out there that don't fit into that model. We just had this 18-month drug court / wellness court, and so we decided to do a little investigation. We found out that there are a group of addicts out there that, there's one that are dependent. They wake up and need it. There's one that get to lunchtime, they need it. There's one when they go to bed that they need it. Then there's also another group that's an abusive type diagnosis. It's one that they get caught riding down the road and they got a bag of weed in the car, they get pulled over, kids are in the back seat, the Department of Human Resources are called, and the children are removed. So what we did was we established a Track 2 drug court / wellness court, and most of what we found in that group was that those people had jobs, they had transportation, they just needed us to get in there and intervene. So we became, at the time in 2015, the second in the country pre-file court, which means DHR, we had trained those, and I keep referring to DHR, that's our child welfare agency. We had trained those frontline, what we call CAN workers or emergency workers, to really assess those cases and find out, is it really worth removing those children, or is it something that we can get in there and get some involvement with the family, kind of intervene before this thing blows out of proportion and we have to remove those kids. So we started our Track 2 wellness court in 2015, and that's been an explosive docket, just unbelievable.
Judge, can I ask you a question? So you said pre-filing, and I saw some looks around the room. So just to clarify, you mean pre-petition?
Pre-petition, pre-file, pre-anything, and pre-removal. Also included in that group are some of those diagnoses of just abuse where there was a cause to remove those children, but we've kept them in this 6 to 9 month wellness court.
So can I ask what jurisdiction?
What
What jurisdiction do you have over those families?
Of the ones that have pre-file, I have absolutely no jurisdiction whatsoever of them, but what they don't know doesn't hurt them. And I don't mean that ugly. I totally respect the jurisdiction and the power that I have. And honestly, because there is no case, because there is no case number, because there's nothing there except a parent that voluntarily walks in my door and says, I'm willing to do this if I don't have to give up my children. So we approach it that way. Now, I have power to make them write me an essay if they do something they shouldn't do. If they're testing positive for a certain amount of time, I do give them a clean date. Once they hit that clean date, if they exceed that, then we start talking about other ways. We also, when assessing these folks for which track they would come into, that information is totally on what they report at the assessment. So I think that we're very good at assessing them for what track they should be in based on the information they give us, but we find out over time that information wasn't as correct as we really thought it was. So once we start seeing the positives or the continued positives after the clean dates, or they're continued hanging out with the wrong people in the wrong places, still getting in trouble, that's when we have to reassess and discover that possibly we need to get DHR involved, the child welfare, get them to file petitions. And really what we do from that point is we encourage them to stay in the wellness court, but we move them from the track 2 drug court to the track 1. But unfortunately in those cases, the children are usually removed. The beautiful thing about either track, but it is the time that the children are outside of the home. It's amazing the difference in those that choose not to come through our wellness court, the time that it takes for some of those parents to get their children back versus those that come through our wellness court. I'll say this to date, and I think it's the most impressive figure. I'm a little embarrassed of the number because in 8 years you would think that we would have more graduates, but again, you got to remember it's an 18-month class. I have a lot of people that sign up for it, and I have a lot of people that drop out before they ever get to the 18 months, and that's fine. I'm amazed at the number of people that drop out and come back to see us when the time is right. You cannot try to change somebody that's not ready to be changed, so they eventually realize they need the help. But in 8 years, I've had 109 people graduate the system, and again, I wish it could be 500. I wish it could be 1,000. It's completely voluntary because I don't want you in the wellness court if you don't want to be there. And of course, now once you're in there, you're mine. But of that 109, I think it's the greatest statistic or the greatest thing we've got going is out of that, I've had 104 that have never come back through the front doors of family court and lost custody of their children, which tells me that 26 years that I'm seeing the third generation of the same family, I hope that I'm getting somewhere and trying to peel that number back. I try to put it in terms of baseball player. If I get up to bat 109 times and I knock it out of the park 104 times, and I strike out 5 times, I think that's awfully good statistics. So that's kind of where we're at with our wellness courts.
You can sit down. I won't make you stand up, but I have another question.
Oh, I'm sorry. No.
So through your wellness court, you saw the impact of therapeutic visitation as one of the core components, and that's kind of what sparked, I think, one of the the initiative that Jefferson County decided to work on through this Reimagining Dependency Courts process. Could I ask you just to talk a little bit about therapeutic visitation, what it looks like in Jefferson County for those families that were going through your family wellness court, and then what you all tried to attempt to do for other families?
Well, I got the word through one of the grants that we have. We had a site visit. As we went on, we were getting big, good grants from the federal folks. And in this one particular grant, they came to do a site visit several months after that we had gotten started with them. But man, I was expecting to see all A's. I thought that we were just knocking it out of the park, doing everything that we could. Again, I tell my team every day, our motto is get out of the box, and you hear that all the time. But let's be different. Let's come up with ways to try to. It's not one size fits all. So I thought we had this thing going perfectly, and then I get the grade, and I get A pluses all the way down until it got to visitation. I got an F, okay? And in Jefferson County, unfortunately, I guess we get caught up in this mundane. We've been doing it this way for 100 years, so I guess we're going to keep doing it. You know, I really thought I had my hand wrapped around this thing, but I'd never thought about the visitation part. I thought about the treatment. I thought about the therapy and just everything I could for the trauma counseling for these parents, but man, they F minus on visitation. And what it was is they were seeing their children on average 1 hour every 2 weeks at DHR, the Child Welfare Department. And again, this is not at all to knock DHR, but a parent really doesn't want to go to the same place that removed custody of their children. And it's not a very happy place. And in fact, most times It's kind of like being, I hate to refer to it as a broom closet, but it's just 4 walls with a little table in there, and somebody sits in the corner and watches you and your child try to have some type of, or I guess keep some kind of bond. So that's where we felt the need for this therapeutic visitation. And I don't know if this is where you want me to get into what it looks like or how we got there first.
What do y'all think? Okay, let's let Judge sit down for a little bit.
Okay.
We'll go down that way.
Well, since Judge stood up, no, we'll make Carrie stand up again. So my name's Mandy Hall, and I'm the Juvenile Service Manager at Administrative Office of Courts, and had the opportunity to be a part of this project. And I will say this was my first big one for the administrative side, so I was really excited and dove in. And really, I just want to echo something that Carrie said. We were working with 2 very large counties. Alabama has 67 counties. One's way down south by the beach, and one's a little above central Alabama. And, you know, we just kind of think that we're all alike, and we weren't. And different does not even begin to be the correct adjective to go. It was night and day. And we chose to highlight this program today because of what Carrie said in Mobile. They're doing something that many of you are very familiar with. And what this talk and conversation is today is something that many of you may not be familiar with. And our hope is that when you leave here, you'll start to think about, can this be something that works for you? So what I want to talk about just for a few minutes is, where did this idea come from? And just to echo what Judge Summers says, you know, I was sitting here thinking and listening as we were talking, and each person in this room, we all have a story. We all come from different places. Our family life, whether we have children or dogs or siblings, we're all different. But the one thing that we have in common is at one point we were all children. And just for a moment, and however you visualize things, whether it's closing your eyes or just taking yourself, is put yourself in that place that Judge Summers says, literally maybe a 10 by 10 room. I think about like an interrogation room. I didn't want to ask y'all who's all been in one of those before, but you know, with maybe just very plain gray walls, a table, and you're scared. And maybe you're 6 or 7 years old and you have siblings, but you don't know where they are, and they're not with you, and that's all that you know. And your mom or your dad walks in, but they're not together. And then there's some stranger in the corner with a clipboard taking notes. And they're watching everything that you're doing. And this time that you have with your family, you probably, as that little child, spent more time wondering what the person in the corner is doing than enjoying the time with your family. And then it's over, and the child's probably crying because regardless of what mom or dad has done, nobody wants to leave their parent. So it's an emotional detachment. You know, we're having to unattach ourselves and remove ourselves from the situation. So I want you to put yourself there just for that moment and imagine that for all of the children that you'll come across in your career, most likely these are the ones and this is what they're doing. So with this program, we finally got to a point with a lady named Jan Bell. She's the executive director with the Children's Policy Council in Jefferson County, and Jan is amazing. She was the person we needed to bring all of us together. Like Judge said, we work with child welfare, we work with the health department, the hospitals, but we don't always get along. And we had to come to a consensus, and that was Jan for us. And also, Jan had the ability, we were able to get a grant and have some money, and they could be the person to receive this. So through this grew what is now called the Jefferson County Family Reunification Program. And I just want to share with y'all a little bit about the therapeutic coaches. And hear me when I say they're visitation coaches. They're not someone just taking notes. They actually, if your child is having a visitation, that person is the only person. You're going to see this person every time you go. You're not going to have foster care worker A to new case worker B to supervisor 1. As child welfare has a high turnover, you're going to have that person. That person goes through a very extensive training. They did a great program in Jefferson County that had several neighboring counties that even wanted to come and be a part of that just to learn. These people what they're there to do is establish those relationships. They want to give you meaningful feedback, and not to criticize you, but helpful and constructive ways to bond with your child. And they're not sitting there they may be observing you from a different room, or they may be observing you through a two-way mirror, whatever the setup may be, and Judge will kind of talk about what the program has to offer. But their goal is to make sure that when the family gets to come, they're doing this at the YMCA of Jefferson County of Greater Birmingham, that this visitation is interactive. They want the kids to have fun. They want the parents to have fun. A lot of times when children are removed, if children are removed for a long time, especially younger children, the bond between a parent and child is lost. So we have to regroup and spend so much time rebuilding that. But this opportunity allows children to not miss that bond because they're doing things with their children. Another goal is just for the visitation coach is to provide additional support to the family. What do you need? How can we make it happen? To really have the goal, they want the goal to be reunification, for these families to ultimately get to be home together. And I think a separation of that is taking ourselves back to that room. If you don't have meaningful bonds and relationships with your children, and then you get to court and child wants nothing to do with you, well, then something's wrong. So this is really taking out that. Also preparing for reunification. This doesn't happen overnight. This is a process. Instead of visiting with your children once a month or twice a month, this is happening weekly, at least weekly. This is also not a situation where you're making an excuse not to see your child. The location is there. It's not going to close. The ability to get there, it's there. Taking out all the factors, and you know, like we talked about, you don't want to go to the place where the person took your child. We, as humans, have a lot of resentment. If someone came and took my child, I would resent them, even if they needed to be removed from my care. But in that moment, it's very difficult to understand that. At the end of the day, they want children to be happy and permanency to be accomplished. So through this training, and I can provide any information after we leave here more specifically about the training, but it's not someone, a DHR worker, monitor child welfare, monitoring your child. This is someone who's gone through extensive training and most importantly wants to be there because they want your goal and their goal to be the same. So that's just a little bit about the Therapeutic Visitation Coaches. Thank you.
I'm going to back up because I think we glossed over the mission of the program. But if it isn't clear, so like Judge Summers talked about his wellness court and one of the core components being therapeutic visitation, and he saw that really had a tremendous impact on the success of the parents that go through that process and the ultimate outcomes for those parents and their kids. The idea with this current initiative is, you know, testing the idea, well, what if we gave that process, that practice, better visitation protocols to families that weren't involved in family wellness court, particularly those families that had a reunification goal. So that's the criteria for this new family reunification program, of which really it focused on better visitation protocols, including therapeutic visitation at a much more family-friendly place, which I think we'll talk about a little more. You had to have a reunification goal. Were there any other criteria? Like who selected the parents for this new program?
Well, unless you want to do. We have a young lady that...
Am I off course? Did I go off course? Is that okay?
Good?
No, you're good. Okay. Go for it.
Sorry, we went to lunch and rehearsed this. And, maybe. No, we went, through our grant, we were able to hire an administrator of this visitation center. She has been a wonderful, and we did an extensive screen, interviewed several great candidates, but we think we got the greatest of all the candidates. But her name is Brittany Lindsay, and again, she's hired through the grant, so I have asked her to be as available as she can, particularly the best time to catch any person, but particularly any parent, in this situation is basically at the crisis point when your world is caving in, and we call it shelter care. I'm not sure what you call it in your jurisdictions, but that's where DHR, the Child Welfare Agency, has gone out and removed children. We had in the state of Alabama, had to have a 72-hour hearing. We call it the shelter care hearing. So that's when I guess there's the most chaos, the most crisis, the most everything going on in that home. So if you can catch those people on the front end of these cases when they're in that mode of crisis, I just feel that's the best time. But she meets them there at the shelter care hearing. That's how they become involved. She tells them about the program. And just like our wellness court, this is completely voluntary. We've had several people that have turned it down, but most love the idea of it. But she meets with those folks, and she sets them up with a therapeutic coach. This coach, I'll just kind of go over their roles. They're going to be with the same coach, just like Mandy said, every single visit. The YMCA, we were lucky enough to, in Jefferson County, they also have the YMCA Youth Center, which is there in Birmingham with us. So it was technically closed on Sundays, so they have opened it up strictly for us just on Sundays. But now that the program is getting bigger and bigger, they're now opening up a little bit more during the week on certain days and times. But what they'll do is each parent, once they sign up and the proper paperwork is in place, and again, just like Mandy said, we get the transportation in place, getting parents there, children there, and trying in some ways taking a little bit of load off of the social worker, because the administrator of this project is getting all these things set up and in place. But we get them there, and the therapeutic visitation coach will sit down with the parents. They'll talk about what they witnessed last week. We'll talk about things we need to improve on, things that they did great at. And then that usually goes on about 30 minutes, and then they'll have the 1 to 2 hour visitation. And again, this is weekly on most cases. And I'm going to show you some pictures in just a minute of what I'm calling the YMCA. I guess we can jump to it. This is the YMCA Youth Center in Birmingham. It is, as you can see, this is not a 10 by 10 interrogation room or a broom closet. It's a fantastic place for kids. It's very age appropriate as far as the rooms and things that they have there. We got the climbing wall. I thought it was cool that I don't think you should just have fun on the visitation every single time. So we've got a computer technologically lab, so you can sit down with your children and do homework there for those 2 hours. If you want to bake with your child, we've got a fully manned kitchen. It's my kitchen on steroids, about 10 times over. It's fantastic. Also for younger children, they've got nursery. It's just, you can see, age appropriate. One of the cool things, and I don't think there's a picture of it up here, is they also have a pool. And that's some things they did. But the YMCA has been kind enough to fully man the center, so we have lifeguards on duty. And not only do they swim with them, if they don't know how to swim, they'll teach them. We've got swim coaches there. So we're basically just trying to make this thing completely work around the family, and not just the good times, but also when you have to teach or help your kids with homework, read to them, again, cook with them, and obviously some fun time too. Once the visitation is over, and again, it's an hour and a half, just depending on the time that's available for that particular parent, then they'll have another 30-minute session to break down what they did. So very, very encouraging. And again, the great thing is just you keep the same visitation coach throughout the whole process. Now that visitation coach will then go back and she'll document in her notes and then report to Brittany, who then reports to me. So as a judge, I'm getting reports on how this is going, and we meet and kind of staff these cases with the DHR worker, and just again seeing how this thing goes. So it's an unbelievable process. Now we're relatively new to it. Our center's been going on about 1 year now. So part of the process was getting those parents there and buying into it. But now it's really picked up and taken off. So it's been invaluable. Again, I've got this to offer you, or I have 1 hour every other week at the child welfare department that took custody of your child. So that's your option there. And that's kind of where we're at right now. I'll just stay standing.
Okay. Mandy, I think I probably interrupted you. Did you have more to talk about the goals, or you want to move on from there?
We can move on.
Okay. I'm trying to look at the time too. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit, Carrie, about kind of going forward, what's next? Are other counties interested? How, this was started with some grant funds. The wonderful Brittany, like how does this go forward? How is it sustainable? All the kind of wrapping up kind of conversations.
So questions. The great thing about this project has been that when people start hearing about it, they want to be a part of it. So the YMCA has been incredible, and there are 6,700 YMCAs across the United States. So in looking at that, there's probably a YMCA near a lot of these people. The great thing about YMCAs, they are on the bus line. So transportation is a little bit less of an issue because they can get there by public transportation. The Y, once they started hearing about this process, they totally bought into it. So they gave a grant to that YMCA to help with the funding of it. I think they gave $25,000. So the Y started opening up with a few times doing a Friday night movie family night where the children and the parents can come and watch a movie together. And then there again, they staff that. They are then also offering a free membership to the families that are reunified, and we have some families that have been reunified for a year. So for a year, they can go to any Y in the United States or in the Birmingham area or anywhere else and actually go with their child and continue building those relationships and having fun, because home can be very stressful, but it's nice to be able to go and do something and get out and have fun. So this is just a really great time for them. Then once the Junior League heard about it in Birmingham, they wanted to join in. So they are actually volunteering and have given a grant to the YMCA to continue this program. So the goal is, if you don't have a Junior League, you have a Rotary Club, you have a Kiwanis Club, you have churches. When you say, we've got this program and it could use volunteers and we're helping the children that need help in our community, people want to buy in. So that's just a really great way to have the community help you help the children and the families and support these moms and dads. So moving forward into the future, like Mandy said, we're hoping that you can take some ideas back to where you are and say, hey, this is something that it didn't happen overnight, and you're not going to create it overnight, but you can work toward that goal and start moving in this more interactive, helping families as opposed to just monitoring families. I know a lot of people go to like Burger King or somewhere like that, and that's great too, but that's not one-on-one time with your child. Usually it's your child going into the play area and you watching them and saying, oh, great, It's not that one-on-one with that child. So we have just really enjoyed working with this project, and as it goes forward, we have another grant that we've gotten that is going to continue to help support this program and grow the program. One of the newest grants that we got is called, okay, you have to say the name, but anyway.
Quality Improvement Center for Collaborative Community Court Teams.
We call it QUIC. So the QUIC grant is actually focusing on children 0 to 3 years old and pregnant women as well. So, but that 0 to 3, there again, there's the age appropriate, doing crafts for really small children, or for the babies being in the nursery and just learning and starting those practices early. So keeping that bonding relationship with that child to reduce the trauma, because we know they're in trauma. So this is just helping that process.
Just two comments, I think, before we turn it over to questions, and I'll ask the other panelists if anyone has any last words. I don't know if we made it clear at the beginning, but there's a large body of research now that if you look at what is predicting or predictive of timely reunification, one of the strongest factors is quality and frequent visitation. It really engages parents in the recovery process. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons like why. So we know it's really, really important. So I'm not sure that was emphasized enough. And then secondly, I don't know, Carrie, if you want to just mention really quickly, I understand that other counties around the state have become interested in what Jefferson is doing and have come to investigate. I don't know if you want to mention that real quick. Sure. Judge.
So yeah, so when something good happens, then other counties want to duplicate that. So we actually have a county that's just below Jefferson County, and they actually have already set up their program in their own county at their YMCA, and they've started that. They haven't had visits yet, but it's in the process of about to start. So they're selecting families. I think they have 5 families selected. So that they're just replicating what's already been done. Because I do think it's easier to look at a program and go, oh, we can do that or do our version of that. And then we also have another one that's in West Alabama that's in Tuscaloosa, where the University of Alabama is. And I'm giving my friends a hard time that are from Auburn, Callie being one of them, and Mandy the other. So, but they are also looking at doing this as well. So, and we just see this as something that we can replicate, because so many programs, it's like, well, we can't do that because we don't have this. But this is one that you can make your own.
There's one thing I thought about that we didn't mention. There was a cost, there was a fee. The Y, as gracious as they are, they have to pay their staff. So when the Sundays became open, the initial agreement, I believe, was $6,000 for 12 months to be opened, 52 Sundays.
So not a lot of money.
Not a lot of money. And then the other question that when we were talking about this that was posed to me is, what if they don't have a YMCA? Well, recreation center, most recreation centers are very inexpensive because they're geared towards families that need recreation, that may have a park. And it may be that you can bring in some creative and innovative idea. So there are other options, and my hope would be that, just going back to what I said, that we were all children at once, and put yourself in that place. And if you were the one, or your child was the one, what would you want visitation to look like for you?
Great. Questions?
Do we have questions?
Hi, thank you for that. It's a very interesting program. I was curious if there's been any evaluation of the program. Are families who go through Therapeutic Visitation program more successful in reunification? And if not, are there plans to evaluate the program moving forward?
I don't mind answering that. At this time, and we keep up with it on a weekly basis as far as numbers. Like I said earlier, we have not, we've been going really strong now for about a year. So it's the amount of data that I would like to have and present to you today is just not there yet. But I can just tell you by reception, the reports that I get every day, and my Brittany is amazing. She documents it because there's a process that you have to go to get these folks in there, and it's a weekly report so I can kind of see what's not happening, so I can go to the next person and say, why isn't this happening? But basically, again, as far as our data, I don't have it for you, but just the perception, I do know that there's probably about 3 families right now that have been reunified already. And I did mention, too, that, I talked a lot about wellness court. It's not just for wellness court. That was my target at first. You also heard Nora talk about oh my gosh, I've lost my train of thought. Over 2 years, long stayers. I wanted to say late stayers because I got in late last night, I guess. But the long stayers, we try real hard. I was blown away, and until Nora came to town, I was completely blown away about. Again, as a judge, I told you earlier, I couldn't believe about this visitation thing. Until Nora came to town, and we started evaluating how many long stayers we have in our care, and I was very proud of the fact, we're moving cases through, and really thought the reunification, I just wouldn't have thought the numbers would have been what they were. And then she pulled out her number, and I thought, oh my God.
With my bad
can't-
news.
I can't believe this. And so one thing, and I had even made a note to even talk about some of the struggles, but in that, especially in that long stare category, we had a lot of children that were basically very close to aging out in our system. So, and those parents really hadn't had much involvement even when the child was younger, and now they're 17, 18, 19 years old, all the way up to 21. It was hard to make some motion there. We also had a group where some parents had just gotten completely frustrated with the whole system, and they were throwing their hands up, and those kids had been in there for 2, 3, 4 years. And I took responsibility, and I take responsibility for the whole system. But I think as a system, we had failed a lot of those parents. They get so frustrated trying to figure out how to do A, B, C, and D, not getting visitation except once every other week. So that's why this was so important to them. I think also part of my obligation as a judge and this long stayer number is to keep kids from getting onto this long stayer number. So that's why I'm working on it. Even though I got a lot of kids in there that have only been in care a very short period of time, I'm trying to keep them off that long stayer list as well. But I promise you, next year if I get to come back, I'll bring you some data. But I can just tell you from the reception we're receiving from the parents and their willingness to participate in the program and the waiting list to get in the program is phenomenal.
Other questions?
You may have mentioned this already, but I wasn't quite sure. Are the children in any type of counseling services, and are the parents taking any type of parenting classes?
Yes. I guess I didn't mention any of that because I was trying to focus here, but absolutely in my wellness court, and whether you go either way, and without wellness or just regular dependency docket, I require them to do parenting classes. I also, as a judge, took it upon myself. I feel like too many times, like I say, one size fits all kind of stuff. So, I've seen it every day. Welfare and attorneys are coming in and saying, we need parenting classes, we need psychological evaluation, we need a substance abuse assessment. Well, we were sending them to certain places, but I really went out and got really involved with the services that we were offering because I found too many places that all you got out of it was a certificate. That's the only thing you took away from it. So we have gotten with some of our churches in town. They have come up. We've got one called Families Count, and it's only a 6-week program, but it's 3 hours. It's either on Tuesday or Thursday night. It's an incredible curriculum. Plus, they transport the children to that parenting class because they want to observe you with your child. Also, the older women of the church have taken upon themselves to create a ministry of food, so they cook the most fantastic grandma Christmas dinners every Tuesday or Thursday night for 6 weeks. So 3 hours, you can see it kind of shrinking down, but then they'll have about an hour and a half curriculum because they want the interaction with you and your child eating. They also want a little bit of playtime so that they can kind of watch, but they also follow a curriculum as well. So because of the faith base, I have a hard time pushing that on folks, even though I highly recommend it. We've also created another parenting class through our wellness court. It follows a full curriculum too, and it's on site there at the courthouse. The other thing that you mentioned, I think, is a huge component. Not only do I think it is incredibly important to get the counseling, particularly trauma counseling for a lot of these parents, but we think of trauma as maybe a physical abuse or sometimes a mental abuse, and a lot of us think of bruises and bumps and things like that. The simple fact of removing a child from a parent and placing him in foster care is a huge trauma, and one that a lot of people that come before me suffer. And that was kind of the onset of some of their problems, mixed in with a lot of other things. And that's kind of how they got to us, is because nobody ever got them counseling. So we take that very seriously for not only our parents, but for our kids, because those kids of today are going to be our clients next time. And what we have found out is a lot of these women, as I said, particularly, that's most of my population, come from a background, and that's what I was referring to earlier, was I think we have a bigger mental health problem than we do a drug problem, because they're using drugs to cope with this mental health problem that they never got help for. Unfortunately, it was usually caused by a family member within their own home or very close to them, and at a very young age, and they've dealt with this. It's amazing. Some of these families worry more about protecting the person that caused the trouble than they do getting the child the necessary help they get. So they deal with, the child deals with this anger of having to see that person at Christmas or at family functions, and they never get the help that they need, so they go to the dope for a coping mechanism, and they start off with a little marijuana, a little alcohol, and that does soothe it for a little while, but unfortunately it becomes not so powerful, and that's when it goes to the opiates and the other problems that we have. So yes, I went around the world to tell you that, but we do, how important it is to get that trauma for not only the parents, but also the counseling as well, for the children as well.
I have two questions. First question, are these families paying for the therapeutic supervised visitation, or is it absolutely free of cost to them?
Free of cost,
Okay.
free to the parent.
Right. And looking around the nation, have you looked at other court programs that are offering these type of services and possibly even more for inspiration or for some guidance and assistance?
I personally have not, but I would highly suggest, I do it with my wellness court even today, and we've been in operation for 10 years. Go out there and visit these things. You're going to see things you don't like, and you might pick up one or two things you do like. You'll be like me. You go to somebody's drug court and you think you got the best one in the world, and you'll pick up just one or two little things. So I highly suggest going to these on-site visits. I have not personally gone as far as the visitation side yet, but our team of folks has been to several of them. I think they're just going within the state of Alabama. We're still trying to grab some more money so that we can carry them further out to see those. But with my wellness court, yes, I've gone to the West Coast, to the North, everywhere to look at different programs. In fact, that's what I was telling you with our pre-file court. We were the second in the country. Sacramento was the first, and I did a site visit there to go see how that worked, because I couldn't wrap my head around not having a case, not having a case number, and how that all looks. So, yeah, it's a fantastic tool.
Okay, one more question. The supervised visitation you said occurs 1 hour to an hour and a half once a week if that's what they choose. And that is done during the 18-month period that they're in the wellness court, or?
The wellness court is 18 months to graduate.
Right.
The beauty of it, you get your children back usually about 5, 6, 7, 8 months.
Okay.
But we want, you got to graduate the program in order to keep us, keep the courts hopefully out of your life forever. So no, it usually comes on pretty quick in the beginning when you've come before me for the first time and I've ordered you to have supervised visitation. That's what we need the Therapeutic Visitation Center for. So hopefully it goes, 3 or 4 months.
Right.
3 or 4
This
months.
program is a 4-phase program designed to last 12 months. That's the kind of the general layout. Obviously not one size fits all, but there is a 4-phase. And then after the 4th phase, even when the child, let's say, reunifies, there's follow-up for 1 year, once a month, just maybe a phone call to check in, to avoid having, with the hope of people not re-entering the system once they've been removed. So it is phased.
Yeah, my hope is that we get your children back as fast as, but not to jeopardize the child or risk anything like that. But it's taking all that risk out with all this supervision and planning that we've got. So hopefully that process just happens a whole lot quicker than without it.
Do you take them with criminal cases pending?
The beauty of my job is the only thing that I hear every single day is child custody dependency type cases. I'm not sure if that's what they call them in your jurisdiction, but that's where my child welfare department has come in and made allegations. I do, amazingly, especially nowadays, we're starting to see, particularly where a parent is positive for a substance and maybe at birth gives birth and the child is, we're starting to see a lot of, I guess it's almost like a companion case. Boom, we remove custody, so that creates a juvenile case, but boom, here comes a criminal case for child endangerment. So I'm seeing a lot of that. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of it. And that's one thing I'm reaching out to the criminal side is, please just give me a chance before you do your thing. Give me a chance to work with them. Another thing, and this is not the time for it, but I'll just give them a little commercial. We've also started something, and we're 6 months in operation now, but it's a grant that we got for complicated pregnancies. These women are coming into these prenatal centers getting testing positive. So this is another pre-file thing. We're jumping in there at that point, and it's all the way up until they're 26 weeks pregnant. After that, there's not much time to help out. So we're starting there and working with them, hopefully keeping that family together, hopefully never filing a case up to 6 months after birth. So that's another thing that we started there in Jefferson County. So, and that's what I say, no matter where you're from, encourage your court administrator, your judge. It's time to come out of the box. You got to start coming up with, and there's nothing, I don't care. Thank goodness I am from a county that has lots of services to address my needs. Unfortunately, there's still not enough, but I don't care where you're from. You can find what you need. Just don't tell me we can't do it. Just you shut up and tell me how we're going to get it done. That's the only thing I want to hear. So.
That's what we're trying to figure out. I'm actually in a criminal court, but our sweet mates are the
Right.
family court, and we are, our county's about 130,000 people, but we have right now, our per capita size of Travis, which is in Austin, in meth cases and CPS removals.
Right.
And so we're just at that point now, we don't know what to do because our meth cases are causing so many removals now that
Right.
they're really going to have a whole new CPS court, which is child damage prevention services.
Right.
court.
I know.
I think it's
Okay,
great, but
I'm-
the other thing too is the collaboration. And I'm sorry, but I also collaborate with my criminal court judges. So as long that's one thing I would suggest.
Yeah. I hate to cut it off, but we are running over into the next session. Please remember to do your evaluations, and there is contact information up here. Thank you very much.